Have you ever wondered about the great explorers of the ancient world? We often think of the Romans or the Greeks. But what if I told you there was a civilization that mastered the seas long before them? A people who didn't just conquer lands, but connected worlds. These were the Phoenicians, the master mariners of antiquity. For over 1,000 years, from roughly 1500 to 300 BC, they dominated the Mediterranean, not with armies, but with something far more powerful. Their story isn't just about ships and cargo. It's a tale of innovation, cultural exchange, and the creation of a network that would shape the future of the Western world. So, grab your life vest and get ready, because today we're setting sail on an epic journey to uncover the secrets of the Phoenician Maritime Empire. Explore how this small strip of land in modern-day Lebanon built a legacy that still echoes in our languages, our trade, and our very understanding of civilization. Before we dive into their grand voyages, let's get our bearings. Who exactly were the Phoenicians? The term Phoenician was actually given to them by the Greeks, likely derived from the word phoenix, which could mean purple-red. This was a nod to their most famous and valuable export, Tyrian purple dye. This incredibly rare and expensive dye, extracted from sea snails, became the color of royalty and power across the ancient world. But the Phoenicians called themselves the Canaanei, or Canaanites. They lived in a collection of fiercely independent city-states along the coast of the Levant cities, with legendary names like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblus, hemmed in by mountains to the east and the vast Mediterranean to the west. They had a choice: stay put or embrace the sea. They chose the sea, and in doing so, they charted a course for history. Their homeland was a crossroads of major empires: Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Hittites. This location was both a blessing and a curse. It made them vulnerable to larger powers, but also positioned them perfectly as middlemen. They became the ultimate merchants, sourcing goods from all over the known world. From Egypt, they brought papyrus and grain. From the Aegean, pottery and olive oil. From Arabia, frankincense and myrrh. And what did they offer in return? Besides their famous purple dye, they were renowned for their exquisite craftsmanship. Their skill in glassmaking, ivory carving, and metalwork was unparalleled. But their greatest export wasn't a physical product. It was an idea, an innovation that would change the world forever. The alphabet, the simple, phonetic script they developed, was so efficient that it was adopted and adapted by the Greeks, then the Romans, and eventually became the basis for the alphabet you're reading right now. Now, with a reputation for incredible goods and a revolutionary writing system, the Phoenicians were ready to expand. But their expansion was different from that of empires like Rome or Persia. They weren't interested in conquering vast territories and ruling over large populations. Their goal was commerce. They didn't expand borders. They expanded influence. Their strategy was to establish a network of trading posts and colonies across the entire Mediterranean. Think of it less like an empire and more like a multinational corporation of the ancient world. Each new settlement was a strategic node in a massive commercial web, a safe harbor for their ships, a new market for their goods, and a source for valuable local resources. From Cyprus to Spain, from Sicily to North Africa, Phoenician colonies began to spread like constellations in the night sky. Each port was politically independent, yet intricately connected by a shared culture, a common language, and the unbreakable bonds of trade. Let's trace their path. Their first ventures were likely to nearby Cyprus, reaching copper, a vital component for making bronze. Then they pushed west, island hopping across the Aegean, establishing posts in Crete and Rhodes. They were drawn by the promise of metals. The further west they went, the richer the rewards. They reached Sicily and Sardinia, islands that would become crucial stopovers on the long journey to the far end of the Mediterranean. The native populations they encountered were often less technologically advanced, and the Phoenicians engaged in what was called silent trade. They would leave their goods on a beach, retreat to their ships, and the local tribes would come and leave a quantity of local resources like metals or raw materials in exchange. It was a peaceful and effective way to establish economic relationships without conflict. Their voyages were powered by some of the most advanced naval technology of the era. The Phoenicians developed a new type of vessel, the Maritime, a galley with 2 decks of oarsmen. This design made their ships faster, more maneuverable, and capable of carrying more cargo than anything else on the sea. These weren't just transport ships, they were floating fortresses, able to defend themselves against pirates and rivals. The Phoenicians were also legendary navigators. They mastered the art of celestial navigation, using the sun during the day and the stars at night to guide them. They were among the first to regularly sail at night, using a particular star in the Little Dipper constellation, which the Greeks would later call the Phoenician star as their fixed point of reference. This allowed them to travel faster and further than anyone before them. Their journey west led them to the shores of North Africa, where, according to legend, in 814 BC, they founded their greatest colony, Carthage. The story of Carthage's founding is a famous one, involving a clever queen named Ido, who fled from her tyrannical brother in Tyre. She asked the local Berber king for just enough land that could be covered by an ox hide. The king agreed, thinking it a small price, but the cunning Dido had the ox hide cut into incredibly thin strips and laid them end to end, enclosing a huge, strategic hill overlooking the sea. On that hill, the city of Carthage was born, whether the story is true or not. Carthage's location was perfect. It controlled the narrow strait between Sicily and Africa, giving it a chokehold on all trade passing between the eastern and western Mediterranean. Carthage would eventually grow to become an empire in its own right, a formidable power that would one day challenge the might of Rome itself. But the Phoenicians didn't stop at Carthage. Their thirst for resources, particularly silver and tin, drove them even further. Tin was especially crucial, as it was the rare ingredient needed to make bronze, the most important metal of the age. This quest led them to the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain and Portugal. Here, they found lands overflowing with silver. They established a colony they called Gadar, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in Western Europe. Gadar became their gateway to the Atlantic. From here, Phoenician sailors ventured into uncharted waters, a realm of myth and sea monsters for most ancient peoples. They sailed north along the coast of Portugal and France, possibly reaching as far as the British Isles, which they called the Cassetarides or Tin Islands. They may have even sailed south, circumnavigating the entire continent of Africa, a feat that wouldn't be reliably repeated for another 2,000 years. This vast network was more than just a series of dots on a map. It was a living, breathing system of exchange that transformed the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians weren't just traders, they were cultural carriers. Everywhere they went, they brought their alphabet, their gods, their art, and their technologies. They introduced the cultivation of grapes and olives to new regions, fundamentally changing local agriculture and diets. They spread new metalworking techniques and architectural styles. In return, they absorbed local customs, ideas, and artistic motifs, creating a unique, hybrid culture that was both Phoenician and cosmopolitan. The Mediterranean, once a collection of isolated coasts, was becoming a connected sea, a Phoenician lake. This interconnectedness laid the groundwork for the later Hellenistic and Roman worlds. Without the Phoenicians breaking down the barriers, the story of Western civilization could have been very different. So, what happened to these masters of the sea? Their decline was gradual. The rise of powerful new empires, first the Babylonians and then the Persians, put immense pressure on their home cities in the Levant. Many, like the great city of Tyre, were besieged and eventually conquered. As the eastern city-states weakened, their western colonies, particularly Carthage, began to step into the power vacuum. Carthage built its own empire, controlling trade routes and territories in North Africa, Spain, and Sicily. For centuries, Carthage was the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean, but their rise put them on a collision course with another ambitious, expanding republic, Rome. The resulting conflicts, known as the Punic Wars, Punic being the Latin word for Phoenician War, some of the most epic and brutal wars of antiquity. In the end, after 3 devastating wars, Rome emerged victorious, and Carthage was utterly destroyed in 146 BC. With the fall of Carthage and the Roman conquest of the Levant, the Phoenician age came to a close, but their legacy is indestructible. It's written into our alphabet. It's built into the foundations of ancient port cities across the Mediterranean. It lives on in the trade routes they pioneered and the cultural connections they forged. The Phoenicians taught the world that you don't need a massive army to build an empire. Power can flow through trade. Influence can be spread through culture, and the sea, rather than being a barrier, can be a highway to connect humanity. They were the ultimate networkers of the ancient world, and their story is a powerful reminder that the exchange of goods and ideas is one of the most transformative forces in human history. Have you ever wondered about the letters you're reading right now? Where did they come from? We often think of ancient civilizations and imagine towering pyramids or grand colosseums. But what if I told you one of the most influential civilizations of all time left behind a legacy, not of stone, but of symbols? They didn't build monuments that scraped the sky. They built letters that conquered time. Imagine a world over 3,000 years ago, around 1200 BC. The Mediterranean is a bustling highway of trade and ideas. Great empires like Egypt and Mesopotamia have complex writing systems. The Egyptians have their beautiful but intricate hieroglyphs with hundreds of pictorial signs. The Mesopotamians have cuneiform wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay, also requiring years to master. These systems were powerful but exclusive, reserved for a small elite class of scribes and priests. Writing was a secret code, a tool of power held by the few. Now, picture the Phoenicians. They weren't a massive, land-based empire. Their kingdom was a narrow strip of coast in what is modern-day Lebanon. Their cities Tyre, Sidon, Byblos were vibrant hubs of commerce. The Phoenicians were the master mariners of the ancient world. Their cedarwood ships sailed across the Mediterranean, from the shores of the Levant to the coasts of North Africa, Spain, and even, some believe, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. As pragmatic merchants and sailors, they had a problem. They needed a simple, efficient way to keep records. Tracking cargo, writing contracts, sending messages across their vast trade network. Hieroglyphs and cuneiform were just too slow and complicated. Time was money. Evan Bakhtin. They needed a system that anyone could learn quickly, from a ship captain to a warehouse clerk. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. And so, the Phoenicians did something brilliant. Instead of creating a symbol for every single word or idea, they focused on the sounds of human speech. They realized that all the complex words we use are made up of a small number of basic sounds. They developed a system with just 22 symbols, where each symbol represented a consonant sound. Think about that leap of genius. From hundreds, even thousands of signs, down to just 22. This was the world's first widespread consonantal alphabet. Let's look at some of these original letters. The first letter was Aleph, which meant ox in their language. It looked like an ox's head with horns. Simple names for everyday objects helped people remember the letters and their sounds. This simplicity was its superpower. A trader in a foreign port could learn the basics in a matter of days, not years. It was a democratization of knowledge. For the first time in history, literacy was within reach of the common person. It was no longer a secret guarded by a priestly class. This was a tool for everyone. Communication became faster, more accurate, and more accessible than ever before. It was the internet of the Iron Age, a technology that connected people and accelerated the spread of ideas. As Phoenician ships crisscrossed the Mediterranean, they didn't just carry goods like purple dye, timber, and glass. They carried their revolutionary writing system. They were the ultimate cultural influencers. In every port they visited, they left behind traces of their alphabet. One of the most significant encounters was with the ancient Greeks. The Greeks, emerging from a dark age where their earlier writing system had been lost, saw the power of the Phoenician script. They adopted it, but with a crucial innovation. The Phoenician alphabet only had consonants. This worked well for Semitic languages like Phoenician, but for Greek, an Indo-European language, vowels were essential for clarity. So, the Greeks took some of the Phoenician consonants they didn't need for their own language and repurposed them as vowels. AN, the symbol for a pharyngeal sound, became Omicron-O. With the addition of vowels, the Greeks created the first true alphabet, a complete system representing both consonants and vowels. From Greece, the story of our alphabet continues its journey. The Etruscans, an ancient civilization in Italy, adopted the Greek alphabet, and then the rising power in the Italian peninsula. The Romans modified the letters, straightened some curves, and solidified the forms into the majestic Latin script we recognize today. As the Roman Empire expanded, it carried the Latin alphabet across Europe, from Britain to the Black Sea. It became the script of law, of government, of literature, and of science for the entire Western world. So when you type on your keyboard or write a note, you are using symbols whose lineage can be traced directly back through Rome and Greece to a clever merchant people who sailed the Mediterranean Sea 3,000 years ago. The shape of the letter A is the ghost of an ox's head. The M still echoes the Phoenician word mem, meaning water, its shape mimicking the ripple of waves. It's a direct, unbroken line through history. Right here, on your screen, the Phoenicians didn't leave behind massive pyramids or a sprawling empire that dominated maps. Their cities have crumbled. Their ships have long since rotted away. But their greatest invention is all around us. It's so deeply embedded in our daily lives that we barely notice it. It's the foundation of modern communication, science, and literature. They've built an empire of the mind, an invisible monument that has outlasted stone and will likely endure for thousands of years to come. Their legacy proves that the most powerful tools aren't always the ones you can see. Sometimes, the simplest ideas are the most revolutionary. The Phoenicians didn't just invent a way to write. They invented a new way to think and to share thought itself, and that is a legacy greater than any monument. Imagine setting sail into a vast, unknown sea. There are no maps, no compass, no GPS. Your only guides are the sun, the stars, the wind, and the subtle whispers of the ocean currents. This wasn't a survival movie scene. This was the reality for one of the most remarkable civilizations in history. For centuries, they were the undisputed masters of the open sea, turning the mysterious and treacherous Mediterranean into their personal highway, long before anyone else dared to venture so far from shore. So, who are these daring The Phoenicians weren't a massive empire in the traditional sense, like the Egyptians or the Romans. They were a collection of independent city-states, flourishing along the coast of modern-day Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. Cities like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos became bustling hubs of trade and innovation. What they lacked in land, they more than made up for with their ambition and their unparalleled connection to the sea. The secret to their success lay in their ships. Phoenician vessels were a marvel of ancient engineering. They built two main types: a wider, sturdier trading ship with a rounded hull, perfect for carrying heavy cargo, and a sleek, fast warship, or galley, designed for speed and maneuverability. These weren't just simple boats. They were constructed with durable cedar wood from the famous forests of Lebanon, featuring a revolutionary design element: a keel. This central backbone gave their ships incredible stability, allowing them to withstand the harsh conditions of the open ocean. But a great ship is useless without a great navigator, and this is where the Phoenicians truly excelled, elevating navigation from guesswork to a science. During the day, they used the sun's position to determine their direction. They understood its arc across the sky, from east to west, and could estimate Gigichi latitude by observing its height at noon. They became masters of reading the winds, knowing which ones would carry them swiftly to destination and which ones to avoid. They also paid close attention to ocean currents, those invisible rivers within the sea, using them to their advantage to save time and energy. When night fell, a whole new map opened up to them in the celestial sphere. The Phoenicians were expert astronomers. Their most trusted guide was the North Star, Polaris. They were among the first mariners to realize that this star remained fixed in the sky while all others appeared to rotate around it. By keeping Polaris at a consistent angle relative to their ship, they could maintain a steady course through the darkest of nights. They called it the Phoenician Star, a testament to how central it was to their voyages. This knowledge was a closely guarded secret, their ancient equivalent of a trade secret, giving them a significant edge over competitors. Their voyages were nothing short of epic. They established a vast trading network that stretched across the entire Mediterranean basin. They sailed to Egypt, Greece, Italy, and Spain, trading their prized goods. Beautiful glassware, a rare and highly sought-after purple dye extracted from sea snails, and of course their sturdy cedar wood. But they didn't stop at the Strait of Gibraltar, known in antiquity as the Pillars of Hercules, driven by the pursuit of new resources, especially tin, which was crucial for making bronze. They braved the turbulent Atlantic Ocean. Historical accounts, like those from the Greek historian Herodotus, suggest that Phoenician explorers, commissioned by an Egyptian pharaoh, even circumnavigated Africa, a journey that wouldn't be replicated for nearly 2,000 years. Imagine the courage it took. They sailed south, watching the sun's position shift dramatically, venturing into waters and climates completely alien to them, with no guarantee of return. They reportedly established temporary settlements along the coast to plant crops, wait for the harvest, and then continue their journey. This multi-year expedition showcases their incredible planning, resilience, and profound understanding of the natural world. These voyages weren't just about commerce. They were about connection. As the Phoenicians traveled, they didn't just exchange goods. They exchanged ideas, technologies, and cultures. They were the great connectors of the ancient world, and their most significant contribution to humanity was something they probably saw as a simple tool for keeping business records. The alphabet. The Phoenician alphabet, a simple system of 22 consonants, was a game changer. It was easy to learn and use, democratizing literacy. This alphabet was adopted and adapted by the Greeks, then the Romans, and eventually evolved into the very letters we use to write English today. So, every time you read a book or type a message, you're using a legacy gifted to the world by these ancient seafarers. The decline of the Phoenicians came as new powers, like the Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, and finally, Alexander the Great, rose to dominate the region. Their great cities were conquered, and their maritime supremacy faded, but their legacy was permanently etched into the course of history. They proved that the oceans were not barriers, but bridges. They demonstrated what humanity could achieve with courage, ingenuity, and a deep, respectful understanding of the natural world. They turned the terrifying unknown into a network of opportunity, wealth, and shared knowledge. The next time you look out at the ocean or up at the night sky, the masters of the open sea, who, guided by the stars, not only charted the waters but also charted the course for the future of civilization. What if the sea was your only kingdom? Imagine cities with no vast farmlands stretching for miles, no sprawling empire connected by roads, no great walls snaking across the inland plains. Their entire world, their power, their very existence, was tethered to the whims of the ocean. This was the reality for the Phoenicians, a civilization whose legacy is written not in stone monuments on land, but in the currents of the Mediterranean. Their cities, Tyre, Sidon, Byblos were not just built by the sea. They were born from it. Their power flowed from harbors, their strength was in their docks, and their influence was carried by their ships. For them, every single wave that crashed upon the shore carried opportunity, danger, and the promise of immense profit. Let's journey back 3,000 years. While great empires like Egypt and Mesopotamia battled for control of fertile river valleys, a narrow strip of coastline, what we now call Lebanon, was home to a people who looked in the opposite direction. They looked to the west, to the endless blue horizon. The Phoenicians were trapped, squeezed between the formidable Lebanon mountains and the vast Mediterranean Sea. For many, this would have been a curse, a geographical dead end. But for the Phoenicians, it was a challenge that sparked one of history's most remarkable innovations. They didn't see a barrier, they saw a highway made of water. Their land was rocky and offered little for large-scale agriculture. They couldn't feed a growing population by plowing fields. So, they turned their harbors into their fields and their ships into their plows. These weren't just simple fishing villages. These were bustling, cosmopolitan hubs of industry and trade. Picture the city of Tyre. Not just a city, but an island fortress, a marvel of engineering. Its harbors were legendary, designed with an outer and an inner basin, capable of sheltering hundreds of ships from storms and enemies. Sidon, its rival and sister city, was famous for its glass production, a magical art of turning sand into transparent treasure. And Byblos, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, was the great timber port. The legendary cedars of Lebanon, prized throughout the ancient world for building palaces and temples, were felled in the mountains and brought to the docks of Byblos, ready for export. The secret to their success was the ship. The Phoenicians weren't just sailors. They were master shipbuilders and navigators. They developed vessels that were the envy of the ancient world. Their trade ships, with their wide, rounded hulls, were designed to carry maximum cargo timber, wine, olive oil, and precious metals. But it was their warships The Maritime, with its 2 rows of oars and a deadly bronze-tipped ram at the bow that protected their trade routes and projected their power. These were the high-tech vehicles of their day, fast, maneuverable, and formidable. They mapped the currents, the winds, and the safe anchorages of the entire Mediterranean. This knowledge was their most guarded secret, a proprietary map to wealth that they passed down from one generation of captains to the next. So, what were they trading? Everything. The Phoenicians were the ultimate middlemen of the ancient world. From the coasts of Spain, they brought back silver and tin essentia for making bronze. From Africa, they traded for ivory and gold. They sailed to Egypt with cedar wood and returned with grain and papyrus. In fact, our word Bible comes from Byblos because it was the main port for the papyrus trade. But they didn't just move goods. They were also incredible artisans. Their most famous export was a dye, a deep, rich purple extracted from a tiny sea snail, the myrrh. This Tyrian purple was incredibly difficult and expensive to produce. It took thousands of snails to create just a small amount of dye. As a result, it became the ultimate status symbol, the color of royalty. To where purple was, to where Phoenician wealth. Their voyages were epic. Phoenician sailors reached the shores of Britain in search of tin. They circumnavigated Africa, a feat that wouldn't be repeated for 2,000 years. As recorded by the Greek historian Herodotus, they established a network of colonies and trading posts that stretched from Cyprus in the east to the Atlantic coast of Spain in the west. These weren't colonies of conquest, but commercial outposts. They were places to repair ships, resupply, and trade with the local populations. And the most famous of these colonies would eventually eclipse its own mother city in fame and power. Founded by settlers from Tyre, legend says by the clever Queen Dido, it grew from a small trading post into a mighty maritime empire. For centuries, Carthage would dominate the seas, its navy unchallenged, its merchants the wealthiest in the world. It became the great rival of another rising power, a city-state on the Italian peninsula called Rome. The clash between these two titans, one a land power and the other a sea power, would lead to a series of epic conflicts known as the Punic Wars, which would ultimately decide the fate of the Mediterranean. But the legacy of the Phoenicians is more than just trade routes and lost empires. It's something you're using right now. Their greatest invention wasn't a ship or a dye. It was an idea. As they traded with countless different cultures, each with its own complex language and writing system, they needed a simpler way to keep records. The complex hieroglyphs of Egypt or the cuneiform of Mesopotamia were too cumbersome for a busy merchant. So, the Phoenicians developed a revolutionary system, a simple alphabet of just 22 letters, where each symbol represented a sound. It was easy to learn, easy to write, and incredibly adaptable. This Phoenician alphabet was a game changer. The Greeks adopted it, adding vowels, and from the Greeks, it passed to the Romans, who in turn spread it across Europe. The very letters I am using to speak these words trace their ancestry back to those ancient sea traders. So, what happened to them? The story of the Phoenicians is a reminder that even the greatest powers can be swallowed by the tides of history. Their homeland was eventually conquered by a succession of empires. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, and finally, Alexander the Great. Alexander's famous siege of Tyre in 332 BC is a testament to the city's power. To conquer the island fortress, he had to build a massive causeway, a land bridge to bring his siege engines to its walls. It was an epic struggle between land power and sea power, and in the end, the land won. Carthage fought its own legendary battles with Rome but was ultimately destroyed, its fields sown with salt. Yet, the Phoenicians never truly vanished. Their bloodline mixed with their conquerors and the people they traded with. Their DNA is scattered across the Mediterranean, but more importantly, their spirit of exploration, of commerce, of connection, lives on. They taught the world that you don't need a vast empire to be powerful. They showed that a harbor can be more valuable than 1,000 acres of land, and a ship can be more potent than a fortress. They were the original globalists, weaving a web of trade and culture that connected disparate worlds. The next time you look out at the ocean, remember the people for whom it was everything. Imagine a color so valuable that a single drop could buy you a kingdom. A color so rare, it was worth more than its weight in gold. This wasn't just any color. It was Tyrian purple, the color of kings, emperors, and even gods. For thousands of years, this deep, rich hue was the ultimate status symbol, a declaration of power and wealth that everyone understood without a single word being spoken. The story of this color isn't just about fashion, it's a tale of obsession, incredible effort, and the rise and fall of empires. It all started with a tiny sea snail and a secret that would change the course of history. So, where did this legendary color come from? The source was surprisingly humble. A small, predatory sea snail. Specifically, several species. These snails weren't just sitting on the beach, waiting to be picked up. They had to be harvested from the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. Fishermen would lower baited baskets into the water and wait patiently to trap these precious creatures. It was a difficult and often dangerous job, but the potential reward was immense. Once the snails were caught, the real work began. The process of extracting the dye was complex and, to be frank, incredibly smelly. Ancient writers described the smell of the dye workshops as overwhelmingly foul. So much so that they were often located on the outskirts of cities. To get the dye, a tiny gland was removed from each snail. This gland contained a clear, mucus-like substance. When this substance was exposed to sunlight and air, a magical transformation occurred. It would shift from clear to yellow, tento, green, blue, and finally, to that coveted, deep reddish purple. Now, think about the scale of this operation. To produce just 1 gram of Tyrian purple dye, it took an estimated 10,000 snails. Let that sink in. 10,000 living creatures for a tiny amount of color. To dye a single Roman toga in the finest, Tyrian purple might require over 200,000 snails. This is why it was so astronomically expensive. Entire mountains of discarded snail shells, some several meters high, can still be found today near ancient Phoenician cities like Tyre and Sidon, silent testaments to this massive, ancient industry. The Phoenicians, an ancient seafaring civilization based in what is now modern-day Lebanon, were the masters of this trade. They perfected the dyeing process and jealously guarded its secrets. The city of Tyre, in particular, became synonymous with this purple dye. The name Phoenicia itself is believed to derive from the Greek word for purple. They didn't just produce the dye, they built a global trade network around it. Their ships, laden with purple-dyed textiles, sailed across the Mediterranean and beyond, making the Phoenicians fabulously wealthy and turning their small coastal cities into powerful commercial hubs. They were, in essence, the world's first luxury brand, and Tyrian purple was their signature product. The color's association with power was no accident. Its cost ensured that only the wealthiest and most powerful could afford it. In ancient Rome, the laws were very specific about who could wear purple. A senator might be allowed a purple stripe on his toga, known as a lidus clavus. Julius Caesar was particularly fond of his alpurpuli toga, and later emperors like Nero enacted laws making it a capital offense for anyone else to wear the color. If you were caught wearing the emperor's purple, you could be executed. It was the ultimate symbol of imperial authority, a visual representation of the divine right to rule. The expression "born in the purple" originated from this era, referring to Byzantine emperors born in a palace room lined with a purple stone, signifying their legitimate claim to the throne. The appeal of Tyrian purple wasn't just its rarity. It was also an incredibly high-quality dye. Unlike many other natural dyes of the time, which would fade in the sun or wash out. In fact, sunlight seemed to only deepen and enrich its hue. Its color was described as the color of clotted blood, a vibrant, living shade that shimmered with different tones depending on the light. The Phoenicians were masters of their craft, able to create a whole spectrum of shades, from violet to a deep, blackish purple, by varying the snail species and the dyeing process. This level of quality and beauty just added to its mystique and desirability. So what happened to Tyrian purple? How did this ancient industry, which thrived for millennia, eventually disappear? The fall of the Roman Empire was a major blow. As the empire fragmented, the complex trade networks that supported the purple industry began to collapse. The demand from a centralized, wealthy imperial court vanished. However, the industry didn't die out completely. It continued in the Byzantine Empire, with Constantinople becoming the new center for purple production. The Byzantine emperors maintained the imperial monopoly on the color, keeping its status as a symbol of royalty alive for another 1,000 years. The final blow came in 1453 with the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks. The capture of the city effectively destroyed the last remaining centers of Tyrian purple production. The ancient techniques, so carefully guarded for thousands of years, were lost. The world had lost its most prized color. For centuries that followed, rulers and the wealthy had to make do with less brilliant, less permanent purple dyes made from plants or insects, like the cochineal beetle from the New World. None of them could truly replicate the unique beauty and permanence of true Tyrian purple. It wasn't until the 19th century that the secret of purple was rediscovered, but not from the sea. In 1856, a young British chemist named William Henry Perkin was trying to synthesize quinine, an anti-malaria drug, by complete accident. His experiment produced a sticky, dark sludge. While trying to clean his flask, he noticed that the substance dissolved in alcohol to create an intense purple solution. He had stumbled upon the world's first synthetic dye. He called it Movine. Perkin's discovery changed the world. Suddenly, the color purple was no longer the exclusive domain of emperors. It could be mass-produced in a lab, making it affordable for everyone. This sparked a fashion craze in Victorian England known as mauve measles, where everyone from Queen Victoria herself to the common person was wearing the new color. The age of synthetic dyes had begun, and the ancient, labor-intensive craft of the Phoenicians became a relic of the past. The humble sea snail's reign over the world of color was officially over. Today, we can create any color we can imagine with the click of a button. It is hard for us to grasp a world where a single color was so precious it was worth dying for. But the story of Tyrian purple is a powerful reminder of how human history, culture, and power can be woven into something as simple as a color. It's a story of ingenuity, obsession, and the timeless human desire for beauty and status. The next time you see the color purple, take a moment to remember the thousands of snails, the false-melting workshops, and the empires that were built on this one magnificent, legendary hue. They ruled no continents, yet they ruled the world. Long before the grand empires of Rome and Greece, there was a civilization that reshaped human history without a massive army. They were the Phoenicians. From a narrow strip of coastline, they wove a web that linked civilizations, ideas, and economies across the vast, uncharted seas. This is the story of the civilization, without an empire, the masters of the sea, who laid the foundations of our modern world. Picture this. It's 1200 BC, the Bronze Age world is collapsing. Great empires like the Hittites and Mycenaeans are turning to dust. The Phoenicians looked out at the great blue expanse of the Mediterranean and saw a highway, not a barrier. Their cities Tyre, Sidon, Byblos were capitals of a sprawling empire. They were bustling hubs of innovation and commerce, gateways to a new era of global interaction. So, how did this small group of city-states become the undisputed masters of trade? These weren't just transport vessels. They were the engines of a commercial revolution. They were strong enough to carry heavy cargo, yet swift enough to outrun pirates. With these incredible ships, the Phoenicians ventured where no one dared to go before, pushing the boundaries of the known world. They sailed past the pillars of Herculesio, we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and into the vast, intimidating Atlantic Ocean. Some historians even believe they circumnavigated Africa, a feat that wouldn't be repeated for over 2,000 years. But it wasn't just about sailing far, it was about what they carried. The Phoenicians were the ultimate middlemen of the ancient world. They connected resource-rich regions with markets hungry for goods. They brought tin from Britain, essential for making bronze, all the way to the Near East. Their network was more than just a series of trade routes. It was a chain of influence. Aste Saleh, they established colonies and trading posts all along the coasts of the Mediterranean, from Cyprus and Sicily to North Africa and Spain. These weren't military outposts for conquest. They were strategic commercial centers. The most famous of these colonies was Carthage, a city that would grow to become a mighty power in its own right, eventually challenging Rome itself for control of the Mediterranean. Through these outposts, the Phoenicians created a shared cultural and economic space. They didn't impose their rule with swords. They spread it through goods, ideas, and cooperation. They created the first truly international market, where a merchant in Egypt could trade for goods made in Spain, all facilitated by a Phoenician captain. However, before the Phoenicians, writing systems were incredibly complex. Think of Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform. with hundreds or even thousands of symbols to memorize. It was a system for scribes and priests, not for the common person. The Phoenicians, practical as ever, needed something simpler for their business dealings, a way to quickly record transactions, track cargo, and communicate with partners across the sea. So they developed a radically simple system. About 24 symbols, each representing a consonant sound. This was the world's first widespread phonetic alphabet. This invention was a gift. It was so easy to learn that literacy exploded. For the first time, writing wasn't just for the elite. Merchants, sailors, and artisans could now read and write. This democratic spread of knowledge was revolutionary. As the Phoenicians traded goods, they also traded their writing system. They didn't build colossal monuments to their emperors because they didn't have any. They didn't write epic histories of their military conquests because their victories were economic, not martial. Their empire was one of networks, not territories. It was a fluid, decentralized system built on mutual benefit and communication. This makes them harder to see in the traditional historical record, which so often focuses on kings and battles. Their legacy isn't in ruins of grand palaces, but in the interconnectedness of our world, in the letters on this screen, and in the very spirit of global commerce. Their great colony, Carthage, was famously destroyed by Rome, but their ideas had already been set loose upon the world. They taught humanity that power doesn't just come from the sword. It comes from connection. They proved that a small group of people with a big idea and a good ship can change the course of history. They laid the groundwork for a globalized world, demonstrating that trade and communication could be more powerful forces than any army. The story of the Phoenicians is a crucial reminder that history is shaped by more than just emperors and empires. It's shaped by innovators, by explorers, and by connectors. They were the civilization without an empire that quietly and profoundly built the world we live in today. They were the original architects of the global village. So the next time you read a book, or see goods from another country, or even just look at a map of the Mediterranean, remember the Phoenician masters of the sea who connected the world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories about the hidden histories that shaped our world. See you next time.